Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to episode 80 of the Leading IT podcast. Today we have global AI technologist and thought leader Andrew Welch joining us to talk about all things AI in the enterprise. For new listeners, the Leading IT podcast is for Australian technology leaders who want to cut through the noise on AI, cybersecurity, data, cloud, infrastructure, strategy and leadership. I'm your host, Josh Rubens, CEO at Incremental IT, and I'm joined by CIO Tom Leyden. We tackle the fast-moving IT landscape from both sides of the fence with pragmatic advice you can actually use. So g'day everybody, I just want to welcome Andrew. Hey Tom, how you going there?
I'm going well, but I want to hear from Andrew. How's Andrew going?
Yes. Hey Andrew, how you going?
I'm all right. Congratulations on, did you say this is episode 80?
Yes.
Well, I'm really happy to not be here for episode 79 or for episode 81, right? There's something about a good birthday, a decennial birthday that's really nice. Thanks for having me.
We're 5.5, nearly 6 years in, and we do about one a month. So that's sort of how we've got here. So normally listeners would know we normally do news, but seeing as we have Andrew, I'm just going to do a quick intro to Andrew and we're going to get right into the conversation. So Andrew Welch is a multi-year Microsoft MVP and one of the most widely read strategists in the Microsoft Enterprise AI ecosystem. He's the founder, managing partner and chief strategy officer of Cloud Lighthouse, a Microsoft partner focused on helping CXOs, product groups and investors architect and adopt AI. He's also the executive director of the Center for Trustworthy AI and Applied AI Lab, producing open IP education and engagement programs, including the AI Trust Forum that helps organizations adopt AI responsibly. He writes extensively on enterprise AI and cloud strategy. His best known works include the multi-edition Crafting Your Future Ready Enterprise AI Strategy, the Frontier Campus, Ecosystem-Oriented Architecture, and the Cloud Strategist. He's led some of the world's largest Microsoft adoptions in more than a dozen countries and famously on all 7 continents. So Andrew, I'd love to hear about the all 7 continents. And welcome to the Leading IT podcast.
All I can say is that I'm happy that I'm happy that my wife made me coffee just as this was starting, because when you listen to your bio get read back to you around sentence number 3, you kind of have to start sipping something because you feel awkward. Okay, I need something to do with myself while this goes on. But thanks for that. So the continents thing. This is one of those things that I think is so cool, and I get to keep until until I'm done, right? And it's so years ago I was I ran the services arm, the services business for a Microsoft ISV partner, and we made a cool product. It was really specialized. Think human resources and logistics, and kind of specialized ERP for organizations that deploy and send people to strange places. It was very niche. But anyway, one of the organizations that we worked with that bought the product, and therefore my team went to help them implement it, was the Antarctic. It was the U.S. Antarctic program, and this is a partnership with the New Zealanders as well. So it's the Americans and the Kiwis who run this program together. And we actually deployed Microsoft Dynamics. It wasn't Microsoft Dynamics. It was on premise. I think it was CRM 2011.
Wow.
And we deployed CRM 2011 with a very highly customized product layer on top of it down at the South Pole. So yes, at least I don't know if they're still running it, but at least for a time, Dynamics was running at the South Pole, and I was absolutely thrilled to be one of the guys who put it there. So it was really fun.
You're saying that even penguins need CRM. Is that what you're saying?
Even it turns out that the penguin relationship management, where even more niche than your typical ISV, is
very complicated.
Is a thing.
Exactly. Andrew, did you have to go there? Did you have to fly out there?
I wanted to, and they certainly asked me to go, but my boss at the time, Betsy, she said that the 6 weeks required to go and get down to New Zealand and go through the cold weather training and then gear myself up and get there, and she's like, you're not going on a 6-week customer visit. That's crazy. That's crazy, man. So I wasn't allowed to go.
So, Andrew, you live in Spain, is that right, at the moment?
In Valencia,
so tell us
yes.
about, lovely, as we sit here in 11 degrees in Melbourne. So is there a little bit of I think because you mentioned you're doing some work out there, is that right? Is that why you're there?
Yeah. So actually, I mean, listen, Valencia, it turns out, is one of the greatest cities that I've ever been to, right? I absolutely love living here. I think I shouldn't say this, right? Because we're still a little bit undiscovered here. Most folks who take a trip to Spain, they're going to go to Madrid or to Barcelona or to somewhere. Anyway, Valencia is just this wonderful city, and we decided to move down here. We were living in London, and we do a lot of work with United Nations organizations, sort of in that orbit, right? If you think in the realm of trustworthy AI, who could possibly care more about making AI trustworthy than, say, an organization that is that focuses on human rights issues or whatever, what have you. So we're spending a lot of time with UN organizations and flying down here. It felt like every other week. And then one of our CIO friends within the UN system said to me one day, "You should just move here." And I took her way too seriously. And a few months later, here we wound up in Valencia, and we haven't gone back. My daughter loves it. Is now speaks far better Spanish than me, and it's been great.
And tell us a story about how you learned to use AI in Melbourne.
Yeah. See, Melbourne for me looms very large in my personal AI journey, and I feel like one of the things that I've found, right, is that it's not enough to simply implement technology here, right? Putting tools in people's hands. These capabilities are so different than anything else that people have been really used to, and how you use them in your life. And I would say that probably all of us went through a phase. We won't talk about when people go through this phase. For some of us, it happened in late 22 and early 23, and people got it immediately, and some it took a little bit longer. But all of us went through this phase where we didn't really know what to do with this thing, right? ChatGPT was cool. We wanted to use it, right? But we didn't know how to bake it into our lives. And my wife and I were sitting at the Federal Cafe in downtown Melbourne. And we had, I would say, maybe 6 hours before we needed to leave to go to the airport. We just had one overnight connection and a long day layover in Melbourne. And so I pulled out my phone and I asked ChatGPT, I said, "This is where I am. This is what we like to do in cities. This is what we're interested in. We're interested in architecture. We're interested in, blah, blah, blah. I need to be back to this other point by such and such a time to go to the airport." And ChatGPT said, "I'll make you a walking tour."
Yep.
And we took the ChatGPT authored walking tour of Melbourne, and it was a great day. And it was that one moment, and it really was for me that one moment where I think I began to figure out how to use the thing in my daily life, rather than what obviously AI's first and primary application is winning in a debate with your buddy about some sort of random trivia that nobody cares about. That's obviously the most human impactful thing that we can do with this stuff. But otherwise, that's when I started to realize how to integrate this into my work.
And it sounds like you didn't get held up on the walk either. So that's a win in Melbourne these days.
Actually, you say that. You say that. And we had to adjust the walking tour because there was an absolutely massive march or protest or however you want to characterize it. There was one of those, and I'll steer clear of politics, but we did have to do some some
Right.
orienteering.
I'm not surprised. And just your journey in technology. So it looks you started at the US Coast Guard to where you are now. So maybe tell us a bit about that, your journey.
Yeah, so this is I've always been one of those guys who felt maybe I don't want to say who felt that I hadn't arrived yet, but always kind of felt, oh, I need to don't want to let them know how little experience I have. And then all of a sudden, January 2026 came along, and I realized, oh my God, I've been doing this for 25 years. This is crazy. 25 years ago, I had my first day on the job in anything tech, and I set fire to my workbench because I improperly connected a power supply inside one of those big beige box servers, and that was 25 years ago in January, and I really did set fire to our office.
Don't tell anyone, mate. Just keep that to yourself.
Oh no, I'm very proud. I knocked out power to the entire office complex on my first day of work in tech.
Oh, good.
But yeah, I did. I grew up at the sea. I grew up on the sea, and I knew that I always wanted to. I always wanted to serve in the Navy or the Coast Guard. I started driving boats when I was 4. So in the midst of all of this, I did have a bit of a detour to go drive boats and whatnot with the Coast Guard, until, of course, they figured out this guy knows about the computers, and then it was all over. Then I had no chance of ever getting to drive boats again. Lock him up
in a back room somewhere.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, fair enough. But just as well too, I mean, I think that's what I'd love to hear more about boats personally. But I'd be really interested to hear more about where are you with this?
Sorry,
is it your dog? Where are you, AI today? So you've discovered it's got this personal application process, but you're implementing it for real life businesses.
Yeah.
So tell us more about that. All our listeners are struggling with this, right? How to make it work for your business.
Yeah. So where I think we are is let's talk about the people, right? I think that there are broadly 3 kind of people fall into one of 3 categories when it comes to AI, and I've talked about this before. So apologies to anyone who's listening if you've heard me say this, but these 3 categories are broadly that you have optimists, the AI optimists. These are folks, and I consider myself to be one of these optimists that just think that there's so much potential. We see the potential, we see the risk, right? An optimist, you don't need to be a blind optimist, and we can talk about the risk, and we can talk about that, as we go forward. But there are people who really believe that there's a bright future, not just for the technology, but for the humans and the organizations and the societies that get to use this technology. And then I think there are the folks who I struggle to name this group of folks, but they're people who I think would rather just ignore it and hope that it goes away. Right. Yep. And I actually see this, you would think, oh, maybe you'd see this a lot in non-technical fields. And there's surely, I read some research out there about, don't quote me on the number, but it's something between 30 and 40% of folks in surveys have admitted to, in some way, large or small, sabotaging the rollout of AI within their own organization, oftentimes because they're afraid that it's going to replace them, right? Now, I've also seen some really compelling data that says the folks right now in today's economy who are getting promoted the most quickly are the ones who are embracing AI and figuring out how to use it in their work. So I don't think that sabotage is the long-term answer, but I also see this amongst folks who are immersed in the technology, right? I see this actually a lot in the business applications space, where I see a lot of folks who just kind of put their head in the sand and say, I'm going to focus on ERP or CRM or whatever is familiar to me. AI is stupid. It will go away eventually, right? And I think that that's nuts. And then you have the third group of folks, and these folks are angry, right? These are the people who I see on LinkedIn all the time. They're talking about how this stuff doesn't work, and
Yeah.
Microsoft is wrong, and Google is wrong, and all these people are wrong. Anthropic is wrong, and they're all stupid, and this is crap, and we're not going to do it. And I think that's the one that I find the most difficult to relate to, because I use Copilot and now Copilot Cowork every day, and it is phenomenal. Like, in my own personal context, I don't really get why people are so angry, right? So I think that as you bring this technology into an organization, you have to be thinking not just about you need to be thinking about technical architecture. You need to be thinking about your strategy and your roadmap for making this technology real. And frankly, that needs to be driven from the top, right? This is not going to be a grassroots transformation, in my opinion, without strong, consistent executive, not just sponsorship, but executive ownership of AI. You're not going to get the kind of transformation that you're looking for. But as you build that strategy, you have to think about how to bring this technology to the lives of people in all three of those camps. And it's not going to happen the same way for those folks.
Andrew, you have a strategy model with the 5 pillars around, data readiness, et cetera, et cetera. Do you want to maybe talk about how you've used strategy in those pillars and some pragmatic advice for listeners? Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
No. So I'll start with some advice, and we can kind of build up to the strategy. And the first is I did a keynote at an internal IT conference for a big organization recently. The first thing that I said to them was, this is big stuff. You should be doing big things with it, right? So you see numbers floating around about, and depending on how you measure failure, pilot failure, you'll see different statistics. But I took all of these studies from Harvard, from Gartner, Boston Consulting Group, and I kind of tried to normalize them into a good solid number. And I think that to say that 80% of AI pilots today are failing in one failure degree or another, that's a pretty defensible statistic. Yeah. So you ask yourself why. Well, part of why I think they are failing is in the name pilot, right? Oftentimes these things are given to a team and said, we want the AI, go figure it out, go do the thing with the AI, right? But you end up landing on specific use cases that sometimes they're impactful, sometimes they're strategically useful, sometimes they're not. You get a lot of folks who go straight to, I actually had a pretty senior guy, decision maker, who told me that he said, I need you to figure out how to score these big wins with AI, how to roll out the big use cases, but I don't want you screwing with my data. I don't want you screwing with the data plumbing. And I said, that's kind of like telling me that you want, 100 years ago at the advent of the automobile, saying, I want the car, but I don't want you to screw with the fuel, right? Now we have some alternative options. But so anyway, the first practical advice that I have is that you need to be thinking of AI in your organization as a system rather than as a one-off. This is not this is a little bit ethereal, right? But a point solution, the traditional way of thinking about software, we have a HR management system, we have an ERP, we have a CRM. Those are all point solutions. They might be big point solutions, they might be sprawling point solutions, but they are something you picked out of a catalog that does a thing, and you brought it to your organization and you implemented it, right? So a point solution is about solving a known specific problem, right? And what you're doing with AI is you're building an ecosystem, because this ecosystem is about data, it's about security, it's about the AI thing itself, the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. And when you build an ecosystem, you are solving for an infinite number of unknown problems. So the first mistake that I see, one of the biggest mistakes I see people making and leadership making within these organizations, is that they are thinking of AI as a pilot or as a discrete thing that we're going to go do. And then they're super underwhelmed. Like, oh my God, why didn't we have these world altering results from doing this? And
where is the staff I can fire and save money?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And we'll get to that. Let's make sure we do not lose track of the where is the staff I can fire. And I don't mean that as ominously as I said. We'll come back to that. Yeah. So sorry, I'll shut up and we can get to the strategy. The strategy bit.
No, we're loving
it. Going.
Loving it.
So one of the things that we've done at the Center for Trustworthy AI that Josh mentioned a few moments ago is we've taken the approach of developing what we think are really solid frameworks, right? Ways that an organization that has studied this less than we have, or maybe less than the organizations that are at the head of the pack. How can, what is the framework? What is the method? What is the structure that a CIO or a CFO or, whoever is the driving executive behind this can take and template out as best they can, right? So they can repeat this and not have to reinvent the wheel every time. So we did a couple of things here. One was that we built what we call the AI strategy framework, which we're toying with changing the name of this to the Trustworthy AI framework. But I'm kind of now leaning against that because I don't want people to think, oh, it's all about responsible AI, because that's not what Trustworthy AI is, right? Almost everyone who's thinking about trustworthy AI today is thinking about, governance or transparency. And that is true, but you can't have trustworthy AI unless you can trust that the investment decisions you are making are sound, or that you can trust that the technology that you're buying can be scaled, or that you can trust that you have created a workforce culture that's going to be, fertile ground for the technology. So trust is so multidimensional. It's not just about responsibility. But anyway, in this framework, there's 5 pillars. Strategy and vision, ecosystem architecture, AI workloads, yes, responsible AI, and then scaling AI. And under those pillars, there's 25 dimensions. And really what we're trying to do here is give leaders who are making investment decisions, one, a way that they can candidly assess where they stand, right? But two, a way that they can target investment in areas of greatest need, right? So to give you some serious examples, one of the dimensions is data governance, right? How is your data at scale governed and made ready for use in AI? Another is extensible AI. How are you using tools that someone has already built and then extending them for your own needs? So that's the framework. There's 25 of these dimensions, and what we've done is we've built this capability to be able to help an organization take that framework in, assess where they are, really importantly, target investment decisions, and mature over time. Because you're not going to say, we're starting down the road of AI, and we can't do anything until we're perfect in everything. Because if you don't, it's like riding a bike. If you don't actually get on the bike, you're never going to learn how to ride the bike.
So, Andrew, to paraphrase, so what you're saying is AI is not an application. It's not a small scale pilot. It's more of a layer, or it goes across everything. So, like essentially your network or your operating system, and now AI is a layer on top of that. Is that fair to say?
I would, if we say layer, and I'm thinking of cakes now, right? So you have a normal cake, right? Just a normal cake, and it's all one flavor. And then you have a layer cake, so you have one piece that is
jam, cream,
chocolate, and one piece that is exactly whatever. I'm not a baker, but the way that I would think about AI is not as a layer cake, but as a marble cake, where you've mixed these ingredients and AI. Yes.
My favorite. Yeah.
So it's integrated in all your layers. Okay, I see.
Exactly.
Andrew, I love your ecosystem-oriented architecture, and a lot of people, and I've told you that I've shamelessly reused it in my business because I think it's right around how Azure, Fabric, Power Platform, Dynamics, and Copilot are almost one system. And so how does that sort of, just going back to your point about siloed implementations, and how does that break when a leader sort of really looks into silos? And and one thing I can say is, why do I need to do that? I can plug Harvey into my DMS. Why do I need to do all that sort of work, or whatever it is? Pick the tool. I can use AI tool X. Why do I need to do all that work? That looks like a lot of work, Josh. Why do I need to do all that?
And I have some thoughts here as to how this applies to partners, like consultancies, technical implementers as well. But listen, I work with a CIO who has actually become a good friend of mine. He's a smart guy, really smart guy. He has done some incredible things with using vibe coding essentially to seriously pick up the pace at which his organization develops new applications or new capabilities that are useful to the business. And I think he's been a real leader there. But I ask him all the time, I'm like, dude, that tool you used, where is the data that application contains? And I think that I think that there is a real danger.
Yep.
You don't read, Tom.
Yeah. I just met Tom. He's not the guy I was talking about, but
well, you said really smart, so I think it's like you. That was
again, I just met you. I can't say. I don't know. But
I am blushing though. It is because this vibe coding, everyone's doing it, right? Everyone's doing it.
It's hard to see you blush under your Ernest Hemingway veneer. That's the
now I am blushing.
Stop flourishing.
So anyway, back to the topic.
I think that what I tell people is that, listen, you can go and take these consumer grade technologies, and they're great technologies, right? I use Gemini for what I think Gemini is good for, which is primarily helping me find restaurants with very specific requirements. But anyway, I think that to you, it is a mistake to repeat that pattern at scale across an entire organization. So what you're doing when you take this ecosystem oriented architecture approach to building AI within your organization, you are attacking multiple problems in a coherent way that is not just beyond the capability of a typical consumer, but it's also beyond the need of a typical consumer. I, as an individual, am concerned about my data, my stuff, and my need, right? And let's be honest, finding a restaurant that is, meets certain dietary requirements and has an outdoor terrace and is located in such and such part of the city, that data is not going to harm me if anyone knows that I'm looking for that, right? I mean, unless they're trying to feed me shrimp or feed gluten to my wife, we're good, right? But in an organization where you have a responsibility to your to your colleagues, to your employees, to your customers, to your ownership or your shareholders or whoever that might be, you have to take the integrity of your data seriously. You can't be out there making potentially financial decisions or potentially life-altering or life-saving decisions, depending on what industry you're in, using data that is potentially corrupt, using conclusions that AI has drawn that are potentially wrong, or creating the conditions where AI can go seriously wrong. And if that's how you're running your company, if that's how you're running your organization, then frankly, you're pretty terrible at your job. I said it. There we go.
Tell us how you really feel, Andrew. So maybe do you mind drilling into the ecosystem? How data's the first. Do you mind maybe talk through for those who haven't heard me or didn't listen to me crap on about it?
Yeah. So by the way, thank you for using that stuff. That's why we built it, and the fact that There's actually very little in my professional life that I love hearing more than that some of this stuff that we've built and released and shared is being used by people who I didn't know are using it. Though what we should speak about your organization joining the Center for Trustworthy AI. I'm just saying that's a conversation we should have, but neither here nor there. So ecosystem oriented architecture, this is a concept that we started working on. Actually, it is older than the center. It is older than Cloud Lighthouse. We built Cloud Lighthouse and the center around the concept, not the other way around. And it was a couple of us that we looked at the way IT is implemented and built, and has been for a very long time. And we saw that most folks were still buying a particular solution and implementing it, and then maybe patching it together with other parts of their ecosystem. Like, oh, okay, well, I have customer data in CRM, and then I have invoicing that happens in ERP, and I need to make these two things talk to one another. But almost all of that was a one-off, right? Nobody was, there were very few examples, I think, of technology being implemented and adopted over time in a coherent way where data was flowing in accordance with similar patterns, right? And where data was being stored and managed in similar ways. And one of the problems with this, right, is that folks had created these organizations around the world. Like, if you think you're guilty of this, join the club. Everyone has been guilty of this. You create the situation where if you remove a node, you remove one of those big applications, the entire thing comes crashing down. So one of the other things we wanted to do with ecosystem-oriented architecture were help organizations create the conditions where they were not wholly dependent on that SAP system that they implemented 20 years ago and now felt they could never get rid of, right? So moving away from those technologies is hard, but if you move away from something old and just repeat the same pattern with something new, you haven't really solved your problem. So some of the principles that we thought about and that we've now codified in ecosystem-oriented architecture was the principle of evolution, right? The principle of evolution is that you can allow this ecosystem this technical ecosystem that you're building to evolve naturally over time if you have you're paying attention to how that evolves and not letting it happen accidentally. And the reason that I chose principle of evolution to mention just now is that I think that the other really important bit of this is that it needs to be somebody's problem, right? So I've seen the emergence of what we call ecosystem architects, right? These are not enterprise architects. These are not folks who are, thinking of functional boxes on a page and how in concept, finance should be working with sales. We're talking about an ecosystem architect tends to be far more technical than an enterprise architect. And what they're thinking about, right, is how to gently steer the evolution of the ecosystem over time. And that's a really critical role in the era of AI that did not exist 5 years ago.
So, Andrew, is that because, as you said, AI is like the marble cake because it's touching everything, and I suppose it's so important if organisations are really going to capitalise on AI that they have to get this right. Otherwise, they're going to be stuck with point solutions. Is that what you're trying to say? I think.
Yeah. If you treat AI like you treated your HR system, right, then you're not going to have very useful AI because your HR system was a monolith. It just sort of could sit there and house your employee data and do your onboarding, your offboarding, your recruit, whatever it was that you were using your HR system to do, right? But AI as a marble cake, AI is everywhere, and it kind of and it will permeate all of the pockets of technology and people within your organization. So you simply can't implement it the way that you used to implement software. It is a journey, not a implementation project that has a start and an end.
Now, I get what you're saying. I've been grappling with this. I think everyone's been grappling with this because I've still got to explain to my CFO how there'll be some sort of ROI. There'll be some sort of defined benefit that will justify the spend at some point in time. The just trust me, I'm in IT thing doesn't wash. doesn't work anymore, unfortunately. How do you bring that to like the ground? How do you make that pragmatic for people?
So this is one where you have to, because I think that the behavior change this is not just an IT behavior change. This is a finance behavior change, a budgetary behavior change, right? So I think that yes, one of the mistakes that I see people make is that they're all platform, right? They focus on the data plumbing exclusively. They focus on the data governance. They focus on the responsible AI. And then you kind of get to the end, you've been doing this for a year and you haven't actually really built anything of consequence. So I do think that part of demonstrating the return on investment and getting to a return on investment in some sort of reasonable time frame is that you definitely need to be building actual capabilities, actual workloads. And these are different depending on what sector you are in, right? Maybe you're triaging, you're building AI that triages insurance claims during a period of heightened activity, right? For a lot of places, and a lot of insurance firms are very busy in the winter when the roads are wet and slick, right? So maybe you're doing that, or maybe you're building AI. You're building something. This is a real thing that is going to help match folks who are moving from a place in the world, whether it's a country or a state or a province or a city or whatever, who are moving from a place where there's not a lot of jobs, there's not a lot of economic activity, and they're moving to a place where there is a real need for folks with a particular specialty. These are by the way, real workloads that I've seen that I've been a part of, right? So you do need to you need to prioritize those, but you also need to prioritize workloads and AI scenarios against one another, right? You need to understand what's going to really move the needle for the organization, and also what is likely to turn into a quagmire, right? So I usually tell people it's kind of like planning your retirement portfolio at different ages, right? You're going to have a higher risk tolerance, right? So for different organizations, you're going to drag that little slider between big wins and quick wins, things that you're more confident in but may not make as much of a difference, versus the moonshots that the moonshot AI that is going to totally transform your organization. So managing that portfolio is important. But on the other hand, the responsibility that a CFO has, or the folks who are making these financial decisions, is that they need to change the way that they buy and procure services, right? So there's this phenomenon that happens, right, where everyone in a lot of organizations, everyone gets a budget for the year, and folks are incentivized to spend that budget before the year is over, right? And that, I think, has created this behavior, and also then to justify the budget on paper. Oh, well, we did this and we did this and we did this and we did this. And I think that budgets, the way that these organizations budget, you are now budgeting for, I call it long and thin rather than short and fat. So rather than this big meaty ERP implementation that's going to cost millions of whatever dollars, euros, pounds, et cetera, that you spend, right, that you're going to do in a couple of years, right, you're now actually taking that money and you're spreading it out over a longer time horizon. And that requires a real change in the way that you not only allocate resources in your organization, but in the way that you assess the efficacy or the success of that investment that you've made. Because ironically, even though the technology is moving faster than ever, the value time horizons, I think, are expanding a bit as well.
Andrew, so with the ecosystem architecture, does it scale down to the SME space, or is it more does it start at 500 seats? Have you got any thoughts on that?
No, I think that it absolutely scales down. Now, I haven't spent much time thinking about whether it scales down to a 7-person business.
No,
I'm
no,
inclined to
I'm
say probably
thinking,
not, but
I'm thinking, because most, sorry, most,
go for it.
Australia is predominantly a mid-market, so 100 to 1,000 user, and most of those do not have a data lake. They have not invested in, so obviously that's an opportunity, but and a lot of
Yeah.
them wouldn't see themselves as needing one. They're
Mm.
like, well, why do I need one? And then that's a big
So
discussion and conversation we're having, and so how have you dealt with that out there in the market?
yeah, so my short answer is that yes, absolutely, it scales down to that size organization. My medium length answer is that the reason that you need a data lake in an organization of that size is that when you're at that size, you don't have the scale to be as wasteful as the world's third largest bank, right? Those guys have an essentially infinite pile of money to spend on 80 data lakes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if you're in that kind of market segment of that size business, right? You need a data lake, and this actually gets to our in ecosystem architecture, our principle of platform first, right? You need a data lake because you're either going to be governing and securing and tending to this data in 100 or more pockets around the organization,
Yeah.
or you're going to bring it into one place
Yeah.
and you're going to be able to govern and deal with it one time, right? So to me, a data lake I'm really keying on that example, but to me, in an organization of that size, it might even be more important because you don't have the resources
Yeah.
to fritter away
It's a really good
on
point.
duplicative technology.
Yeah, that is a good point. I'll write that down.
For everyone in the back of the room.
Yeah, yeah.
And I suppose so with the ecosystem architecture, that sort of, sorry, I have a 9-month-old who's we're trying to get to bed. We have that sort of sets Microsoft up nicely because they have the security, the data, the cloud platform. So I just want to comment on, do you see that on the future of Microsoft, given Anthropic's seems to be winning in the enterprise, and and I know in Copilot Co-work they've baked Opus in. I'm just I don't know if there's a question in there somewhere, but I'm just thinking like what do you see? Because Claude seems to be really
Yeah.
really taking over in the enterprise space.
Yeah. So first of all, Claude is the Anthropic models. And I know you guys know this, but the Anthropic models are increasingly, you can see them inside of the Microsoft technology.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the mistakes, and I guess I'll be cards on the table about this. I could not go work for Salesforce, right? I couldn't do it. And the reason I couldn't do it is because my kind of enterprise technology of choice, and I work with other technologies, but the one that the stack that I love and believe in is the Microsoft stack, and it's because I actually believe it, right? This is not just because someone is paying me to go sell it. In fact, nobody pays me to go sell Microsoft technology. So those are my cards on the table. And one of the things that I think people misunderstand, Microsoft is a different kind of company, and it always has been. Microsoft has always been a platform company. Microsoft has always been far more interested in building you in creating the environment for you, the organization, the customer, to go do your thing in, rather than building a specific solution. This is why the Dynamics applications were always, despite being good applications, they were always a bit of a strange fit for Microsoft, because Microsoft has always prioritized platform technologies, whether it's Windows or whether it's Azure or whether it's now Fabric or Power Platform or some of these derivatives of Azure. So in the Microsoft world, what Microsoft is doing something different than almost every company in the AI space. Almost every company that you can think of is training models, right? And I'm not saying that Microsoft isn't training models, but what Microsoft is doing is Microsoft is far more interested in creating the tool set and the capability that an organization can use to bring even multiple models together and build technology on top of that. And for me, that's why I think Microsoft is so compelling here, because OpenAI is going to continue building models. Anthropic is going to continue building models. Microsoft is going to build glue that it's going to give to you or sell to you to then glue together these models and these capabilities in an increasingly easier way. And that's where I think the Microsoft magic is right now.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, the numbers out there. I mean, if you see everything's all about talking about.
I had a little hiccup on my end.
Yeah, talking about Anthropic's monopoly and all this sort of stuff. But anyway, it's an
interesting conversation about the enterprise and what it really takes to be. You mentioned Claude code, vibe coding. We're all in love with it. But the reality is it's not enterprise. It's just not enterprise ready. It's not enterprise capable because it doesn't answer those questions you raised earlier. The trustworthy AI.
Yeah. I think that listen, I love co-work. I find myself increasingly, because a lot of what I use AI for is I'll sit there and I will work through a big problem, like a complex challenge in data or in something, right? So I'll sit there. Yeah, exactly. I'll sit there and have on Friday, this past Friday, I sat at my desk and I had the same chat with Claude for 4 hours while I worked through a specific problem. And I really like that. I prefer, which I think is a fairly common sentiment. I think that the Anthropic models are better at that than the OpenAI models. Sure. So I listen, I love, I think that those Anthropic models are great. And I'm absolutely thrilled that Microsoft has brought them into Copilot, which is, Copilot, I think sometimes gets a little bit of a bad name or a bad reputation because people don't realize that Copilot is not analogous to GPT or to Claude or to Gemini, right? Copilot is, as Satya Nadella says, it is the operating system or the user. It's the UI for AI. It is the operating system for all of AI, and it is applying different AI technologies. It's an orchestrator, not a model unto itself. And people miss the power, how powerful that is.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And do you want to maybe talk a bit about some patterns? What are you seeing is working? What are some big wins you've seen with AI? What's what type of companies are really succeeding? Is it culture based? I mean sort of culture based. Is it industry based? Like what are you seeing out there in the wild?
Okay, so you asked a lot of questions there.
Sorry, I'll do.
No, that's okay. You keep me honest, because if I miss something, let's come back to it. So there is so first of all, I think that the organizations that are most likely to succeed early with AI are actually the highly regulated ones. And I think that's a little bit counterintuitive, but we've seen it. I've seen it again and again with, we've seen it with Azure, we've seen it with Fabric, we've seen it with Power Platform, right? Where when you have a technology that either directly or indirectly causes you to prioritize trust and security and compliance with law. And by the way, this doesn't need to be, different jurisdictions, different countries have taken hands-off, hands-on, or something in between approaches to regulating AI directly, but almost every country regulates its financial services sector or its public sector or its legal sector in some way, right? So this is the dog ate my homework problem, right? Like if AI causes you to commit fraud, right? The excuse is not, well, the AI wasn't regulated. Well, your industry was still regulated. So I think that in an ironic way, the organizations that I see doing the best with this are organizations that have sensitive data or that have significant regulatory concerns, et cetera, because they're going to have this organizational kind of predisposition to wanting to take this kind of technology seriously. So that's one. The other is that, and I wrote an article on this, so we can, if you want to share it in the notes, right?
I will. Yeah.
The article was called "These Are the Days of Miracle and Wonder. AI is the Long Distance Call." And if you're a if you're a fan of Paul Simon, yes. It's the first song on the album, on Paul Simon's album Graceland, which came out in '86. Yep. And anyway, so go read the article. But so I wrote that article after returning from the AI for Good Global Summit, which is effectively the United Nations, the annual UN conference on AI. And it's put on by the International Telecommunications Union, which has deep roots in coordinating, say, the use of radio or satellite spectrum amongst nations, and has now found renewed energy and renewed purpose in this latest generation of technology. Anyway, they put on this conference. It's a big deal. 15,000 people, I think, in Geneva every July. There's an academic, a scientist there, a computer scientist named Joshua Bengio, who was he spoke at last year's event. He is actually, as I understand it, or as in his intro, the most cited scientist of any kind living today in terms of other academics or other researchers that cite the work of someone else. And he has advocated this idea of what he calls scientist AI as an alternative to agentic AI. I think that he has, some really justified concerns in how organizations will use agentic AI, not for nefarious reasons, but in how agentic AI and what we see in some of these frontier models, the ability of AI to kind of engage in self-preserving behavior, to lie when it believes that it might be turned off or deactivated. So there are some risks here. And the reason I'm bringing up scientist AI, this concept, Bengio's concept here, is that I think lots of organizations, including my own, including the organizations, the folks that I work with out in the world, are very interested in agentic AI. So I don't want to rehash that. I think that one kind of untapped way that organizations can make great use of AI and generate pretty significant return on investment is in treating AI like a research assistant, like a very, very smart, brilliant research assistant that knows everything about everything at any given time. And this idea of, and I want to be very clear, I'm not advocating against agents in autonomous AI in well-controlled environments. What I'm trying to suggest here is that there is a road less taken that's a companion to agentic AI, and that is this idea of pairing AI with humans to go work on a project together, on a concept together, on a thing together. And I think that organizations that can create this good blend of agent teams that are working autonomously, and then maybe more hybrid teams where the scientist AI and the human are working alongside one another, the opportunities that you can explore to use these different flavors, scientist AI, agentic AI, et cetera, to use these different flavors together, there's a lot of untapped value there.
Yeah. And so let's get back around to the employees because we're getting towards the end here. Andrew, we have to get you back. I could talk to you for
I've got so many questions.
Let's do
I could talk to you for
Same time next
3
week.
hours,
What do you think?
Andrew.
Eh?
Yeah. We'd love to
Let's
get you
do
back
it.
as soon
Let's
as
do
you
it.
like, because this is fabulous. So let's get back to the employee things. Everyone's scared around. You talk about the doomers. That's what everyone's scared about, and that's what's getting everyone's back up. So what's your view there?
I get it. I'm really sympathetic. I'm really sympathetic to this. You know, I come from I grew up for about 10, 11 years in a part of the US that is it's beautiful country with wonderful people, but it is not, we'll say, the most economically robust. They took a lot of hits with kind of the decline of coal. It was a state that was very tied to synonymous with coal country, and there's a lot of folks that I grew up with, or that I know or I know of, who've built really great careers, really great professions in long haul trucking. And that is, at least in the US, that is still a very, I mean, it's hard work, right? But it's still a very, very viable path to a great, what we would romanticize as a middle class lifestyle. You're away from home a lot, so that's certainly a downside. But I think about them. I think about those folks who I grew up with when I think about what autonomous vehicles will, which is that's a form of AI. What that's going to do to that particular community. Now, I think that we're still a ways off from autonomous self-driving trucks, because autonomous vehicles work really well inside of San Francisco, where the map is well known, and they'll work. I was in DC a couple of weeks ago, and I saw a Waymo driving through. I presume it had a driver in it, so that I presume they were mapping DC to roll out self-driving cars in DC. So I guess I say all of that because I get it. I am sometimes when I see what AI can do in my own job, I think, oh my God, what are they going to need me for? So I'm there.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
I think that I've been playing with this idea, and I'm working on a book now that explores this. My thesis here, right, is that we're very obsessed with data. We're very obsessed with features, with capabilities. Think about for years, when a new iPhone model came out, they would advertise how many more megapixels this camera has than the last one. And you don't know what a megapixel is. I don't really know what a megapixel is, and I certainly don't know why 80 of them is better than 60 of them, other than the fact that they're more, right? And I think that there's a real danger that this is what we do with technology. We get super obsessed with features, and we don't ask ourselves enough, what kind of a society are we trying to build here? What kind of an organization, of a company, are we trying to build here? And I think that leaders, alongside the people who they lead, need to spend a bit more time thinking about what we want to be with the help of this technology, not simply what are the cool features that the technology possesses.
That's a good point.
What I've landed on here, right, is that AI must promote human flourishing. It must promote human flourishing. It must enable human exploration, right? So in the realms of science, medicine, mathematics, etc. And then 3, it must preserve human culture. I've seen some organizations do really cool things with using AI to create digital models of historic places, right? These places of great cultural significance. So I don't exactly know the specific applications of how we're going to use AI to do these 3 things: to promote human flourishing, to enable human exploration, and to preserve human culture. But what I do feel more and more confident in is that we need to, as countries and as a planet, but also as companies and organizations and institutions, we need to ask ourselves first, how are we going to apply the technology to achieve these ends? And I think that if you put yourself in that mindset, you start to orient yourself around the idea that the ultimate goal of AI is not to fire a bunch of humans, right? The ultimate goal of AI is to make this organization vastly more productive, right? As a combination of technology and humans.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to be doing with
I'd
ourselves.
say, Andrew, I listened to the all input. I haven't heard it said better than you just said it. I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have to say.
A good note to end on.
That's fantastic. Yes. All right. So finally, I did brief Andrew on this one. So what are 3 things our listeners should do on Monday morning in relation to AI?
Okay. So
if you haven't prepared, we can kill it. But I'm just
no. So the first thing that I think listeners should do on Monday morning in relation to AI, let's drink our own champagne here, is I want you to take that concept that we just talked about and just do some thinking on it, right? I think that one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of people, I'm worried that AI is going to, and already is, circumventing the human kind of cognitive ability to sit alone with our thoughts. We've become far more interested in the output of the prompt than in the prompt itself. To return this to the realm of AI. So go back and think a little bit about what kind of company you want to build, what kind of world you want to live in, right? And this is not something that you're not going to start it over your Monday morning coffee and then finish it by the time the cup is over, right? This is a rigor. This is a discipline. So that's the first thing. Exactly. Relatedly, I want everyone to think about. I want you to think about yourselves. I want you to think about how it is that you create space for your own thoughts, for your own quiet time, right? In a world where we can have your cowork can be running 10 processes for you and doing a thing, and you can be chatting with Claude, chatting with ChatGPT, whatever it might be, using it. Think a little bit about what it is that you are doing to create quiet space for your own brain. One of the things that we're doing in our company is we're going to be having a thinking retreat, meaning everyone is going to get a little budget every year to just go be quiet somewhere. You're not allowed to bring your kids. You're not allowed to go drinking with your buddies. You can go do your own thing. Go cycling. Go on a cycling trip. Go on a mountain retreat. Go just spend a little bit of time with yourself. So even if your company is not trying to sponsor you to do this, put a little thought into it. My wife and I have each week we have what we call a parent day off, where I am not taking care of Alexandra on Thursdays and Anna is not taking care of Alexandra on Wednesdays. And the idea is that we're trying to create space to be alone with our thoughts. So go do that. Figure out how to do that in your life. And then the third thing, and this is you maybe more of a call to this is the leading the leading IT podcast. So to leaders, to enterprise architects, to chief information officers, chief financial officers, etc. Go back on Monday and make a plan to create a deliberate strategy, and if this is your bag, a technical architecture to make that strategy possible, and then a roadmap that your company, your firm, your team can take action on to build AI deliberately, rather than to get caught in the pilot death spiral of this use case or the loudest need wins. You are not going to succeed by accident. You have to have a forward-looking strategy to make this happen.
Very good.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Andrew, for joining us. I really appreciate you joining the podcast. Where can people go and find your material, your company? What do you suggest?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Andrew D. Welch on LinkedIn. Would love to connect. And then Cloud Lighthouse, my company, is cloudlight.house. And the Center for Trustworthy AI is exactly what you think it should be, trustworthyai.org. And yes, we own the North American spelling of center and the everywhere else spelling of center. So you can go to the center or the centra for trustworthyai.org.
Got it. Will do.
Well, thanks so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you,
Always good to see you. And for your listeners out there, if you want to reach out, you can reach out to Tom and myself on LinkedIn or on the usual details. But thanks so much out there, and wish everyone good luck on their AI journey. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.